My name is Rex Rainey. I was with 1st Battalion Headquarters Company, 157th Regiment. We mobilized as a detachment and wasn't made a company until I think we got to Camp Barkley, Texas.
I started in Anzio. The regiment had landed in Sicily before that and had landed in Salerno.
I remember our real taste to what war was Bloody Ridge in Sicily. And our battalion, I'm not sure how many were wounded on that, but we had 5 killed.
We were shipped to Sicily, and they were trying to get us, we were replacements, they were trying to get us with the 45th Infantry Division, but the 45th Division had already invaded Salerno, but they brought us over to Salerno, I think it was around September 12th to 13th.
Palermo fell pretty easy. And then 1st Battalion made an end run to Messina to try to cut off the Germans.
On this particular morning, we were given an objective to take. Happened to be Hill 990, right outside a casino. And we was attacking that, and it was raining. There was supposed to be a 50 caliber machine gun on another ridge that was going to give us support fire, but it rained so hard they couldn't do that. But my platoon, the 3rd platoon, was assigned to go right up into them and draw their fire. Another platoon went out about halfway and went up, and another went out to the other end. So we hit them with a 3-point attack. Their medic and I got pinned down with machine gun fire. And it was chipping rocks in our eyes, and he lost it. So I went into his, to the heavy weapons and was trying to get to his men, and I got up, and they ran me back twice. And the second time that I came back, I got right in front of the mortar, and I was just getting down, and a mortar shell fell in, and it exploded, and the concussion turned me flip backwards. I just suddenly threw my arm up. I didn't realize I was hit. I threw my arm up, and I saw blood squirting down my arm. Well, it been hit in the neck. The first thing came through my mind was jugular vein, and I knew that was it. I got hit maybe about 10 o'clock in the morning. It was dark.
Why was it called the $1 Million Wound?
Because I got reclassified from it. The nerve in the back of my neck that runs across to this eye was cut. And when I got out of the hospital, they came out and met the ambulance, and they said, everyone from the 45th, fall out. So we went over, and they said, go down to the dispensary for a physical. You're shipping up in the morning at 6. They need you bad. So I went up there, and he began to ask his questions, and I really believe he was a psychiatrist, according to the questions he asked. So I was still a teenager, and I was still cocky, and I answered his questions, and after a while, he just asked me and said, what do you feel about going back into combat? And that's when I went crazy. I'll never know why I said what I did, but I said, well, I'm not going to lie to you. I said, I had much rather stay back here, but I can still take it if you see I'm able.
And my baptism of fire was on Anzio Beach. I was assigned to the 45th Division. Company M, 157th.
The Battle of the Caves. Well, after we landed into Anzio, our company went up in and relieved the British in the caves. And we were up there 3 days. And then the British came in to relieve us, but they lost all their Bren gun carriers because the caves at that time were all surrounded. So they had to fight their way in, and they lost all their heavy weapons. And H Company, being heavy weapons, had the heavy weapons. They asked if we would stay over another night, another day and a night, which we did. And then when it was our turn to go out, by that time the Germans were waiting for us, and we no sooner got out of the caves than we got into a field. They sent up the flares. We all fell on the ground, and they kept us covered until daylight. And then they said, "Come on, for you the war is over." Yeah.
You know, and when we went off, I never forget that when we got off the LVCPs, the water went right over my head, and I threw the tripod off and squeezed the belt, and right to this day, I don't know if I hit bottom or not. And then when I went on the beach, I picked up a light tripod until we can get a new one, and then we start going towards it, and then we start climbing the mountain. You know, it wasn't far. You go up the mountain thing. We've landed at 8 o'clock in the morning, and we walked at 11 o'clock at night. And then the next day we attacked. We attacked at 6 o'clock, ready to think. And then we walked to 8 o'clock that night. And then we just tried to catch up to the Germans. Anything else you want to know?
No, they marched us into Rome, and they kept us in Rome in a converted movie studio where there were a lot of other prisoners. Besides Americans, there were Canadians, French, and of course the British, and some of the North African fighters that were fighting.
Well, I was in Anzio. Somehow I was one of the unfortunate ones that picked up lead, but lived to survive it.
And then they moved us up to Camp Latrina, which was just below Florence, Italy, into an old Italian barracks. And from there, they kept us in there. Oh, I was there about 3 months. During the time, which you probably see in the movies, we joined the digging of the tunnel, you know. So we found out they were digging tunnels. They were trying to keep it secret, but so one of my jobs was to go into the hut that they were bringing the dirt out, fill my pockets full of dirt, and then walk around the campground, and as I'm walking, I empty the dirt. And we usually tried to go in pairs, and as I'm emptying the dirt, the fellow behind me is walking and he's kind of smoothing it out so the Germans can see it.
After the initial firefight, we had only late resistance, so we pushed it in, and soon we're 30 days ahead of schedule. So we had to wait for the rear to catch up. But the road led into town. We had crossed the Moselle River. We were on the right side, looking down the road. We set up our guns firing the road, and not thinking there would be too much action. We weren't even dug in. At 2 a.m., my buddy Kimball said he heard tanks. I stuck my head up, and sure enough, there were tanks coming down the road. 3 Mark 6s leading a convoy of Germans. We had nothing that could stop the tanks. Our artillery wasn't in place yet. There was a BAR man shaking in his boots in the ditch on the side of the road. A track of a Mark 6 is 1.5 times the wide of a man. Lieutenant Barfoot was also our platoon commander. Realized we couldn't do anything because we had no support behind us.
The hut that they were digging the tunnel from was on the edge of the group of huts, and it was closest to the fence. So they had to know how far to go before they could come up under, they had to get under the fence, and then they wanted to know how. Well, they had the fence, and then they also had what they called a warning area, which was another area that just had a small barbed wire fence on it. The fellows knew how far from the edge of the hut to that first wire, how far it was. They didn't know how far that was, so how are you going to measure that? So we decided, well, let's play ball. So we played ball, and what we would do, we would deliberately miss the ball and throw it light enough so that it would hit the outer fence. So in order to retrieve the ball and measure the distance, we had to call the guard up in the tower, call his attention that we want to pick up the ball. So he said, okay, and as he's doing, we measured that, and then give it back to the guys and say, well, you got 6 more feet to go.
We were relieved from line duty and went back to Salerno. Rumors had it we were going back to the United States. Not true. We started amphibious training for 1 week and were put aboard ships. We were the invasion force for France. The 3rd Division, 36th and 45th Division became the 7th Army. The invasion was sometime in August. You lose track of time and days. Our first objective was St. Maxime. I was with the 4th Wave in. When the front of the boat went down, all I could see was GIs laying on the beach. The seawall had not been blown yet. It went up with a big bang, and we pushed forward.
They had spies in there or something, but by the time the guys opened the tunnel, they had a nice tunnel, came up in a nice spot, but the Germans were waiting for them already. So nobody got through the tunnel. Decided, well, we're going to get out of here. We're going to charge the fence, tear it down, and run up into the fields, because we were out in the fields. And a friend of mine, Bill O'Neill, we were there, and we said, we're too damn weak to tear that fence down. Let's climb it. So he said, okay, but there were 2 fences, really. First one wasn't much. We tore that down, and we started to climb it, and we were on the edge of the fence where there was a post, so we had a good thing. And we're starting to go up the fence. Bill was getting over it. I was just ready to go over it. And, of course, the guard came running down yelling, halt, 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 and he fired. I heard the shot, and I said, uh-oh. And something grabbed me from behind and pulled me down. And I thought for a minute, gee, that guy hit me? But it wasn't. What he did was shot the fellow behind me. And as he fell, he grabbed me. So now, Bill's over on the fence. He's going, and says, and he took off. And I turned around, and the guard's yelling at me to stop. And I said, no, I didn't. So I turned around and ran back to another building. And as I was running, he fired another shot. But this one, fortunately, he aimed low, and it went right between my legs. It threw up sand and kind of stung me, but the bullet didn't hit me. So, of course, in surprise and everything, I gave out a big yell, and then ran to this building, and then turned around and ran back and went into the hut. Well, then the guard must have told the commanding officer that I'm sure I hit one of them. So they, well, how are we going to find him? He said, well, I know I hit him in the legs. Because, well, how do you know? And we found out later, he said, well, he yelled like he was hit. So he went, the German guards went all through the compounds, made everybody take their pants down and look for wounded legs, and they couldn't find anybody. Of course, I didn't tell them I was there.
And I joined the outfit somewhere there in France and fought up on the line and until a couple of weeks before Christmas, and then I had a little break, and then I had to go back up online. I don't know where I went online because they just come in and took us, and they drove us out and dumped us, and and I ended up on this hill up there on Reapersweiler, and was up there, and we were surrounded, if I remember correctly, about 5 days or so. And finally, we ran out of ammunition, we ran out of food, naturally, and they tried to drop us some food by air, and we didn't get it because it was dropped over into the German side.
In Alsace-Lorraine, we had quite a tough time for a while. It was in Alsace-Lorraine that we lost the entire battalion in the Battle of Reapersweiler.
The night I was hit was the opening counterattack. It was the ensuing Battle of Reapersweiler, which we were to stop a German breakthrough. Our 2nd Battalion and 3rd Battalions encountered fierce fighting. They were attacked over and over. Casualties were heavy, and they became surrounded. Low on ammo and casualties, they were told to stay at all costs. The counterattack was stopped there, but it cost 6 companies of men killed, wounded, or captured.
The battles was getting terrible, and radio frequency, Charlie Company said they were about to all be taken.
About the 5th day or so, the Germans sent up one of their people, and they wanted us to give up. They told us to give up, and we were supposed to give up. I think by 3:30, if I remember, between 3:30 and 5, somewhere in there. And if we didn't give up, why, they was going to run over us, you know. So our commanding officer decided, someone decided, I don't know who, but they decided that we were not going to give up. And I remember now, and I think it was at 5 o'clock or so, they were going to overrun us. So we decided at 3:30, we were all going to get out of our foxholes and try to make a break for the rear. Of course, we were surrounded, but we were going to make a run and try it anyway. And I remember when we got out of the foxholes, they let us have it with mortars, crossfire, machine guns, and so, well, some of us got killed right then and there. And
we realized something big was going to happen, but we didn't know what. Then we began taking amphibious training again. We wondered. Looking at the map, we realized the Rhine River was in front of our area, and between us and the Rhine River was a Siegfried line. We knew we were in for some tough times ahead. The regiment attacked, and we got to the Siegfried line. The fight was intense.
When we were in the Siegfried line in December, when I was with the other unit, the unit I went overseas with, where I confronted a German in the trench, German soldier. We both shot at each other and both missed. And it's just one of those situations. I don't know how I could have missed him, and I know one of my buddies told me that he shot at me. I didn't know that, but it's just all kind of the fog of war, I guess. I retreated back down the trench, and we started throwing grenades up it, kind of looped them down so we could put the grenades in the trench behind where this guy was. And nothing ever happened, so we must have been effective. But we held a circle of trenches on the top of a ridge, and we we left people there at that point as a permanent guard the whole 4 days we were up there, so they couldn't come down the trench at us. But they were attacking us from the other side. We had a circle of trenches. We stayed there 4 days and 4 nights, and I don't think anybody slept more than an hour the whole 4 days. Another incident that also stands out in my mind, when we went through the Siegfried Line, we had 90 millimeter, new 90 millimeter gun tanks with us, brand new. They were first we'd ever had. And these 90 millimeter guns blasted those pillboxes, those German 8-foot thick concrete pillboxes, into rubble. And the infantry really didn't have to move. We were being hurt by the intense shelling in the area we were in, being a big trees, very large trees, and the artillery shells were hitting the limbs up in the top of the trees, tree bursts we called them, scattering shrapnel down on us, and we were very intense fire. My platoon lost about 20 men wounded that day just from the artillery, and I wanted to move them out into the open where they would not be subject to the tree bursts. So I came out of the trench that we were all in. The whole company were in the trenches that the Germans had dug in this wooded area. And I went over to see Captain Rosnoff to tell him we got to move out. I got about 20 yards to his position when a shell came down and hit the tree above him and killed him and 2 other men. And I had gone over to see him. There wasn't anything I could do, so I decided then to go back to where I was and found out that a shell had dropped in the trench where I had left. I didn't know it exactly what happened then, but I found out later that the man that had been next to me was missing. And it turns out that the shell had almost a direct hit on him.
That took several weeks to get these replacements and get them organized and so on. And then from there, of course, we went on through across to the border into Germany, and then toward Alsace, toward Schaffenburg.
Well, Schaffenburg, unfortunately, was a hellhole. Totally needless and unnecessary, because the city was completely surrounded. And I don't know why it was decided that we had to take the city street by street, house by house, because our front lines had moved almost 75 miles south of Schaffenburg by the time we got there. But we progressed through that city, took us 7 days, and we were literally fighting for every house. Even talking to the Germans who were maybe in the house next door. That did happen on one occasion when one of our men got hit and was wounded out in the street, only about 30 feet between the houses and a street with sidewalks in between. We were yelling back and forth with them to let a medic go out on the street to treat the guy. But it was a real disaster in terms of the concentration and the intensity. 7 days, day and night, and we were even firing bazooka rounds at the houses nearby to get the Germans going. But mainly it was a house-to-house operation, and we probably had, I think, about 5 men killed and maybe 13, 14 wounded. We were just one company out of the regiment. There was a lot of bombing in Schaffenburg, many buildings demolished. There were over 10,000 German civilians killed with our artillery and Air Force. But we came to the last schoolhouse, you might say, that had apparently the Germans were holed up in there. And my lieutenant says, we got to take that schoolhouse. And I was just the platoon guide at that time. And I knew that the squad, the rest of the rest of the platoon was behind us in the house, but there was a big 8-foot-high windrow of bricks that had been bulldozed up by the Germans. And I said, let's go. And I started charging up that windrow of bricks and fell flat on my face. My helmet fell off, but the lieutenant and his runner kept going. And by the time they got down into the street the street was clear to go about 20, 30 yards to the front of the schoolhouse. They were both cut down with a machine gun.
One of the interesting things that my own experience in Aschaffenburg was that all of a sudden word was that there was a group of officers, German officers, who want to just give up, and so the question was, we didn't know much about them, and they wanted to surrender to somebody of the same rank. Okay, it was decided by somebody that instead of us sending an officer there, we would send a sergeant who would impersonate an officer. And I, a little PFC, was told to go along, and I was to be a sergeant for the occasion and go along, be the interpreter.
And I was not on the liberation of Dachau. The company commander sent his driver back to pick me up, and the first sergeant, so we could go up and see Dachau firsthand. So we were there about an hour after it was captured.
My wife and I visited Dachau some years ago. I was kind of curious what it looked like, and it doesn't look at all like it did when we were there. You know, it had changed substantially. The main gate is where most of the action was.
I was not prepared for Dachau. Thanks. Never before had I ever seen anything like this. As hardened as I was, it brings tears to my eyes today. It was unbelievable.
And we came in the way Charlie Company, part of it, had, over the railroad tracks through the back way, instead of the way Colonel Sparks had from the front. And wasn't too long till we were in Munich, and after 3 days in Munich, I got sent back to the States on rotation.
At this point in my life, and I recall all of the experiences I've had up to this point, the experience I had in my military career was the most important, and I've never been more proud to be an American and a soldier of the United States Army than I have been in the past and up to this point. I am very proud of myself, my organization, my outfit, and the fact that I was a soldier in the United States Army.
You're very close. In other words, you would risk your life to maybe trying to get a buddy. Like I know one time a fella named Young was in on, and we were getting shelled, and he got bounced out of his hole, and he rode down the embankment, and we got up and said, "Are you hit?" "No." Then we said, "Well, get back in your hole." is ready to go out and get them. It's something you don't find in civilian life unless you maybe a cop or a fireman, you know. The field is coming because he's watching out your back and you're watching his back. It's protecting one another. It's this is what it is. It's close. You don't have that real closeness in civilian life because you're all going through the same thing.
I think reunions have served a purpose. This will be the final swan song for the 157th 1st Battalion that I knew. But I'll be interested tomorrow in seeing what the modern battalion is like. And looking forward to tomorrow.
There wasn't a better regiment in the whole Army than the 157th Infantry.